Last Thursday, as you will well know, Ian Abrahams, aka the Moose of TalkSport, did an interview with David Gold, for which, in my own personal opinion, he was rightly and correctly derided. I did a video on the Friday, just reported on my opinions on what had gone down in that particular interview, and the video went down really well. Got to thank you for your comments on that, and my thinking seemed to be aligned with a lot of other people's. He went on to get a lot of stick that night, a lot of stick on social media, and also he was getting a lot of stick on the TalkSport platform itself. Not just in the comments section, but West Ham fans were phoning up the radio station. And they were giving their opinions on what they thought was a very, very poor interview. Number one, it was deemed to be overly friendly. Number two, it wasn't accurate. And number three, the West Ham fans didn't feel that Moose was representative of them. Why is that important? Well, because to a large extent, Moose has sort of made his name off the back of being a West Ham fan. He wears it with a badge of honour, the fact that he's a West Ham fan. But he didn't really represent West Ham fans, and he didn't really represent the tone, bearing in mind there was going to be a march, or a protest, should I say, the very next day. Now, his colleagues, his TalkSport colleagues, came out behind him in a massive show of force. First of all was Alan Brazil, but then the most vociferous of all was Jim White. I was listening to the radio myself. I was in the van, I was on the way to work, and Jim White got Moose on, and he said, Moose, the West Ham fans aren't happy with you. What are they moaning about again? West Ham fans are unhappy. Will they ever be happy? He said. It was condescending. It was patronising. It was said with an air of disdain about it. Those pesky West Ham fans, they're moaning. They always moan. I would say that was his tone, but that was what he was saying. Not one to hide his disregard for the West Ham fans, of course, Jim White. As we know, Jim White has enjoyed hospitality at the London Stadium as the guests of Messrs Gold and Sullivan before. He thinks he's led us to the promised lands. He thinks they've led us to the promised lands. Jim White thinks we should be grateful. Ian Abrahams himself, the Moose, was unrepentant. Ian Abrahams would have been fully aware that those criticising him were just proper, normal West Ham fans who were frustrated and sick of the fact that not only has nothing changed in 10 years, not only do we still find ourselves in exactly the same league position as we did when Gold and Sullivan joined us and took us over, we find ourselves having been relegated under them. And the context of this is very, very important because, as I say, I felt there was a lot of misreporting for Moose, and I think Moose is responsible for this because I feel because he's a West Ham fan, he should almost know the facts more than other journalists who report on West Ham. He would have known the feeling towards the fans, but he dismissed the disgust that the West Ham fans had about that interview. He labelled us moody 16-year-olds on Twitter. I don't care, he said. What do I care for what a bunch of 16-year-olds think on Twitter? Now, Moose is on Twitter quite a lot. It's impossible to be on Twitter and not see someone's profile picture. He will be completely aware that he was being contacted by grown men and women, some 16-year-olds, no doubt, but he will be aware that the vast majority of West Ham fans who were upset with what he said were grown adults. So he knew what he was saying. That was an insult. He decided to ridicule. He decided to patronise by basically labelling us as 16-year-olds. Now, if you will remember, when I did my video, I'm not happy, and I never have been, with the narrative that gets peddled out that Gold and Sullivan are our saviours. Did they save us? They may well have saved us. And it's not particularly that bit I argue with. What I dislike hugely is the fact that it's peddled out. It's peddled out as a fact, and it's not one, that they were the only show in town. Without them, we would have been destroyed. We would have got... The narrative has got worse, progressively worse. In trouble. In administration. Fast forward a little bit, in liquidation. Ceasing to exist. It just seems the longer history goes on, the more calamitous, the more terrible, the more like Armageddon the recounting of history becomes. But it wasn't like that. And I will get onto the march in just a second, because what you're about to hear is a load of misinformation. But my point here is I'm not about to tell you anything secretive. When I did my video the other day, I was going from memory. I said there are 3 other parties in for us. I checked it out. I thought, did I remember it right? It turns out I did. I'll tell you who they are. So let's just go back 10 years. Lambansky, who owned us, they went bust. There was a massive crash. Basically, the people that owned the stakes, so basically some more banks, some more investors, took hold of West Ham United, took hold of the shares that Lambansky owned. Basically, they took hold of anything that Lambansky owned. And part of that was West Ham. We were put up for sale. And there were 4 shows in town. David Gold and David Sullivan. Tony Fernandez, who at the time was running, I think it was Lotus F1. Now, Tony Fernandez had big backers. It was the Mattels, who are Indian billionaires, and also Flavio Briatore. You may well remember him from Formula One. He was the overlord at Benetton. There was also Massimo Solino, an Italian multimillionaire, probably the least realistic of the 4 in many respects, if we're being honest, because he'd been in trouble. He'd been in some financial trouble. And to be fair, it wouldn't have been particularly good for West Ham had he have taken over. He wasn't a solid and reliable guy that we would like to run our club. The last one, and I'd remembered it, but I'd remembered the name wrong. It was the Intermarket Group, which was led by Jim Bowe. Now, I have no proof of this at all, but it's rumoured that Michael Tabor was involved in the bidding for that. Michael Tabor had tried to take us over and move us to Beckton many, many years ago. But it didn't happen. And as it actually stands, Michael Tabor basically gives us a payday loan every season. Every season, we use a loan from Michael Tabor to get some money. And then when the TV money comes back at the end of each season, we pay off the loan. We get a loan off him every year to get some operating capital. So to suggest that had Gold and Sullivan not come in, West Ham would have gone into administration, would have gone into liquidation, is totally wrong. They just came out victorious in the bidding process. I still don't understand how, because apparently they didn't even bid the most money. So, I mean, that's a strange one. It's not anything we will ever know. We'll never know the true figures. The only thing we know is that Gold and Sullivan bought half the shares in West Ham for 50 million. That's all we know on this one. Here's why I don't like this. This is not on some top secret government documentation. This is not redacted material. I've done a simple search from the takeover period. I found a Telegraph article. I found a Guardian article. All the major newspapers all reported on it. This is common knowledge. So my question is, why? Why on earth did TalkSport not report this? Why does Jim White peddle the narrative that they saved us, that nobody else was capable of doing so, that nobody else was interested? I don't expect any better from Jim White, quite frankly. We've seen it numerous times. He is a board ally. He's even said on his radio station he's a close friend of David Gold. That's fine. That's fine. He has no allegiance to West Ham. I don't expect him to have any. Quite frankly, I don't think he's a particularly good journalist anyway. But I do take umbrage to the Moose, to Ian Abrahams, reporting what has happened in this way. Why? Because Ian Abrahams certainly knows the facts. Ian Abrahams certainly knows that there were other parties interested in buying West Ham. Why does Ian Abrahams know it? Because he was reporting on it at the time. He was a journalist at the time. He absolutely knew the intricacies and everything surrounding the buyout bid. So with that in mind, what was Ian Abrahams doing suggesting to David Gold that he knows, I know that you saved us, David. I know what you've done for the club, he said. But tell everyone else. Tell the others that don't know. I guess he meant the people he was going to go on to basically insult with the label of stroppy 16-year-olds or whatever it is he said. My point is, it's misinformation about West Ham. Misinformation from people that actually know the true facts. But it takes us for fools. And I found something else that took us for fools at the weekend. There were a couple of journalists who reported, and I'm not going to dig them out because I have actually got respect for a couple of these. But I have got two examples. I'm willing to share these examples with people that know me personally, so as I will show you I'll show you the clips. I'll show you where the statement has been amended. They were reporting that the crowd for the rally, for the West Ham protest, was in their thousands. This was quickly altered to hundreds. Now, I found that strange, the fact that it was altered. We all get things wrong, particularly if we're looking at a large group. But there's quite a hell of a difference between hundreds and thousands. And I don't mean a thing just sprinkle on cakes, of course. But there is a hell of a difference. And then I started hearing it more and more. Gio alluded to it in our review. Moose, of course, what do we expect, reported that hundreds of fans were outside. I spoke to somebody, said there were hundreds. Now, from where we were on the boats, we could actually see, as the canal goes round to the right by the aquatic centre, we could see it. There were lots and lots of people there. We were doing our CPR training, we didn't attend. But lots of people came to the boats who had attended, and I was looking at pictures, and I wasn't looking at pictures of hundreds of people. But I would expect, if there were 15 journalists all looking at that group of people, while some might have thought it was hundreds, I would reasonable to assume that some would have thought it was thousands. Yet everybody was saying the same thing, hundreds. They're trying to play it down. There was no way it was. But I thought, there's no way I can be sure of this. There's no way I can prove. There's no way to extrapolate how many people were there. Or so I thought. There is a way. There was a risk assessment before the protests. The protests were really well organised, and I should probably say that the protests went off remarkably peacefully. People performed their speeches very, very well. I think the worst thing about the day apparently was the PA system wasn't loud enough because there were more people there than they thought. But because it was all done properly, because all the relevant parties were contacted before, risk assessments were done. The capacity of the area put aside was 1,800 to 2,200. And they exceeded that area. So again, why the narrative of only hundreds there? But that's not the only way you can tell how many people were there. I think it's very, very important. And I said the other day I'm not going to get conspiratorial. Actually, I am a little bit here. Because nobody misbehaved. Everybody behaved really well. There were no arrests. In many respects, what the protest claimed to do, which was to come together to talk about Gold and Sullivan and Brady and how they wanted them to... I'm not even going to say I didn't even listen to the speeches. So I'm not going to say what they said. But it was very much a case of join us. We meet up. We show our displeasure. And then we go to the game peacefully and enjoy the game. And that's really what happened. In many respects, you start wondering, well, maybe they wanted it to kick off, not the people in the protest. Maybe the journalists who had reported on this inaccurately would have liked it to have kicked off. So the moment they couldn't do that, you found yourself ratcheting down the numbers. I'm actually looking at one here. A complete backtrack. Thousands of West Ham fans have gathered outside the London Stadium. Backtrack. I've just been told it's hundreds. I've just been told. Anybody could see it. Anyway, how do we know this? How do we actually know how many people were there? Now, I think a lot of people, they all think we're stupid. everything that has come out of the club for years and years and years, think we're stupid. I think the club would love the media to believe that as a whole, the West Ham fan base is happier than we were following the Burnley protests. We're not. I'm very, very sure we're not. I understand there are some happy fans. I understand there are people who don't like this video. I understand there are people who didn't want to go on the protest. But there are many, many thousands of fans who are very unhappy with the board and the way things have been going. I think a lot of unhappy fans are disgusted that we find ourselves where we do. The lack of investment, the lack of progress, more than the lack of investment, and the failure to keep on the promises, and even the fact that the promises are now being, the language, they're being called something else, hopes and dreams, rather than promises. The fact that we haven't even managed to get the hopes and the dreams, or whatever they want to call it. So they don't want the press to know that we're still unhappy. So it's advantageous for them to label the protest as in their hundreds. But I found something, and there's actually a guy that's produced some software. You can tell how many people are in crowds. You've only got to know two things. You've got to know the density of how densely they're packed. And then you've basically got to know the meterage of the area, by which point you can extrapolate how many people were there. I'm going to flash up an image now. And this is not, this is not airy-fairy stuff. This is from Crowd and Safety and Risk Assessment. This is from Doctor. Is he a professor or a doctor? Which one are you, mate? Keith Still. Got lots of letters after his name. But what he's done, and there is some software where you can look at this. I've got to be honest with you, the software was paid for software, so I thought, I don't matter, I'm going to try and extrapolate myself. Basically, what you're looking at here, in an area a little bit longer than a tennis court, but a little bit narrower. A tennis court is slightly narrower. Basically, this area that you're looking at is a bit bigger than a tennis court. And there are 600 people in the image that you are currently looking at. 600 people there. Now, 600 people stood in a box that's 10 metres by 10 metres. That's all you're looking at. Now, once you know the area that the West Ham fans were stood in, and even if you do not know the exact meterage that's there, even if you do not know that that is 70 metres from the edge to the far edge at the start of the aquatic centre, even if you don't know that, you know that's bigger than a tennis court. You know that's significantly more people than are on the image. So my point is, we know it was packed out. We know the risk assessment was from 1,800 to 2,200. There was, at worst, 1,500 people there. There's probably more like 2,500. And I'm sorry, this has probably not been the most entertaining video in the world. And a bit numbery and all the rest of it. But it does make you wonder, for all the journalists to be singing from the same hymn sheet, what on earth is going on? Why were they briefed? And why didn't one of them pop their head up and say, actually, looks like more? Well, in fact, two of them did. They didn't retracted it. Why would you be bothered? If you thought it was 2,000, just leave it up. You say, oh, whatever. A couple of thousand people there. Oh, no. I better go and retract that. Why? I've been told. One of them even wrote, one of the BBC journalists, I'll tell you now, actually said, I've just been told what to write. I swear to you. I've got the thing screenshotted. But the point is, they can't continue to pull the wool over people's eyes. I think that was a successful march. Static protest, whatever it was. I think it was a success. I think it went so well, I think they'll probably be able to build on it. Gio said in the, what did he say? Maybe in a cup of tea. So they get one shot at this. And I think what he meant was, if they get it wrong, it'll never be able to happen again. I think they get another shot at it now. I really do. Yeah. That's it, really. What I would like to say, if anybody's quite, no one's going to watch this till the end. What the most boring video you ever seen? We did the CPR training down the boats. Just want to thank everybody involved. We've got it was a wonderful skill to learn as well. Been absolutely wonderful to learn that. The training was so good. I did it twice. And sadly, I mean, you may well know, somebody passed away after the game. West Ham fan passed away. These are core skills. We've got videos coming out. Get yourself done. Get yourself trained. Get yourself trained in CPR. Might save a life. You never know.